Asian civilization. The Iberian colonies of Atlantis. The Iberians, known as Scanes, colonized Sicily in the ancient days. They were the original settlers in Italy and Sardinia. They are probably the source of the dark-haired stock in Norway and Sweden. Tradition claims that the Iberians embraced the Ligurians, Cantabrians, Australians, and Aquitanians. Strabo says, speaking of the Turduli and the Turdetani, they are the most cultivated of all the Iberians. They employ the art of writing and have written books containing memorials of ancient times and also poems and laws in verse for which they claim an antiquity of 6,000 years. The Iberians are represented today by the Basques.
At the farthest point in the past to which human knowledge extends, a race called Iberian inhabited the entire peninsula of Spain, from the Mediterranean to the Pyrenees. They also extended over the southern part of Gaul as far as the Rhone. It is thought that the Iberians from Atlantis and the northwest part of Africa, says Winchell, settled in the southwest of Europe at a period earlier than the settlement of the Egyptians in the northeast of Africa. The Iberians spread themselves over Spain, Gaul, and British Islands as early as 4000 or 5000 BC. The fourth dynasty of the Egyptians, according to Brooks, dates from about 3500 BC. At this time, the Iberians had become sufficiently powerful to attempt the conquest of the known world. The Libyan Amazons of Diodorus, that is to say, the Libyans of the Iberian race, must be identified with the Libyans with brown and grizzly skin, of whom Brugsch has already pointed out the representations figured on the Egyptian monuments of the 4th dynasty. The Basques are of middle size, compactly built, robust and agile, of a darker complexion than the Spaniards, with gray eyes and black hair. They are simple but proud, impetuous, merry, and hospitable. The women are beautiful, skillful in performing men's work, and remarkable for their vivacity and grace. The Basques are much attached to dancing, and are very fond of the music of the bagpipe. According to Paul Broca, their language stands quite alone, or has mere analogies with the American type. Of all the Europeans, we must provisionally hold the Basques to be the oldest inhabitants of our quarter of the world.
History of Spanish Empire. Beginning with Columbus' exploration of the late 15th century, Spain took the lead in developing an empire in the New World. The Spanish Empire extended across most of the Americas and into Asia in the 16th century. Spain divided up the world into three primary viceroyalties: New Spain, New Castle, and New Granada.
History of Spanish Empire. Similarly, it seems to be a matter of preference whether one accounts as Spanish the Bourbon Kingdom of Naples in the 18th century, which, while dynastically and militarily aligned with Spain, remained a constitutionally separate state. The problem is compounded by the evolving definition of Spain itself, which, though unified by the crown, was still in some sense a collection of separate kingdoms, namely Castile, Aragon, and Navarre.
The term Spanish Empire generally refers to Spain's overseas colonies in the Americas, the Pacific, and elsewhere. However, no consensus exists among historians as to what is to be counted as part of Spanish Empire. making it difficult to determine some of its territories in Europe. For instance, traditionally, territories such as Low Countries were included, as they were part of the possessions of the King Spain, governed by Spanish officials and defended by Spanish troops. However, authors like Henry Cameron contend that these territories were never integrated into a Spanish state and instead form a part of the wider Habsburg state. Because of this, many historians use Habsburg and Spanish almost interchangeably when referring to the dynastic inheritance of Charles V and Philip II. It is also important to note that though Portugal was invaded and occupied by Spanish forces and was ruled by the same monarch in personal union, the throne of Portugal retained its independence from the Spanish throne, and thus Portugal formally retained its independence. Furthermore, Portuguese rule over its external territories from Lisbon was maintained in this period, effectively resulting in the joint Spanish-Portuguese rule through the person of the monarch. For this reason, this period of the empire has sometimes been referred to as the Spanish-Portuguese Empire. Thus, when Portugal regained its independence, it retained its colonies without any internal changes of governance, law, and commerce. West Indies. The West Indies is a large group of islands that separate the Caribbean Sea from the Atlantic Ocean. These comprise three main island groups, such as Bahamas in the north, Great Antilles in central, Lesser Antilles in the southeast.
The Bahamas consist of over 3,000 individual islands and reefs. The Greater Antilles include the island countries of Cuba, Jamaica, Haiti, and the Dominican Republic or Hispaniola and Puerto Rico. The Lesser Antilles are the much smaller islands to the southeast, and they are divided into two groups, the Leeward Islands and Windward Islands.
Indians were the first inhabitants, and then in 1492 the explorer Christopher Columbus became the first European to arrive at the islands. It's believed by historians that he first stepped foot in the Bahamas. Columbus called these islands the Indies because he thought he had finally reached Asia. Spain, when Columbus' mistake was discovered, renamed them the West Indies to distinguish them from the Spice Islands in the Pacific Ocean, which we call now Indonesia.
Today, the West Indies, better known as the Caribbean, is comprised of many island countries, dependencies, and territories, and as a group remain one of the premier tourist destinations on the planet.
The American Revolution came about fundamentally because by 1763 the English-speaking communities on the far side of the Atlantic had matured to the extent that their interests and goals were distinct from those of the ruling classes in the mother country. British statesmen failed to understand or adjust to the situation. Ironically enough, British victory in the Seven Years' War set the stage for the revolt, for it freed the colonists from the need for British protection against a French threat on their frontiers and gave free play to the forces working the separation.
The First American Revolution. The American Revolution was the political upheaval during the last half of the 18th century in which 13 colonies in North America joined together to break free from the British Empire, combining to become the United States of America. They first rejected the authority of the Parliament of Great Britain to govern them from the overseas without representation, and then expelled all royal officials. By 1774, each colony had re-established a provincial congress or an equivalent governmental institution to form individual self-governing states. The British responded by sending combat troops to reimpose direct rule. Two representatives sent in 1775 to the Second Continental Congress, the new states joined together at first to defend their respective self-governance and manage the armed conflict against the British known as the American Revolutionary War, which was done on 1775 to 1883, also American War of Independence. Ultimately, the states collectively determined that the British monarchy, by acts of tyranny, could no longer legitimately claim their allegiance. They then severed ties with the British Empire in July 1776, when the Congress issued the Declaration of Independence rejecting the monarchy on behalf of the new nation. The war ended with effective American victory on October 1781, followed by formal British abandonment of any claims to the United States with the Treaty of Paris in 1783.
The American Revolution initiated a series of social, political, and intellectual transformations in early American society and government. Americans rejected the oligarchies common in aristocratic Europe at that time, championing instead of the development of republicanism based on the Enlightenment understanding of liberalism. Among the significant results of the revolution was the creation of a representative government responsible to the will of the people. However, sharp political debates erupted over the appropriate level of democracy desirable in the new government, with a number of founders fearing mob rule. The remarkable leader of this slave revolt was Toussaint Preda, later called Toussaint L'Ouverture, and sometimes the Black Napoleon. Slave revolts from this time normally ended in executions and failure. It began in 1791 in the French colony of Saint Dominique. Though born a slave in Saint Dominique, Toussaint learned of Africa from his father, who had been born a freeman there. He learned that he was more than a slave, that he was a man with brains and dignity. He was fortunate in having a liberal master who had him trained as a house servant and allowed him to learn to read and write. Toussaint took full advantage of this, reading every book he could get his hands on. He particularly admired the writings of the French Enlightenment philosophers who spoke of individual rights and equality. Toussaint L'Ouverture is a slave in Saint Dominique who serves his master as a coachman and has achieved some degree of literacy. He emerges as one of the leaders of the first independence movement in the West Indies. A hero perfectly suited in the Romantic era, a noble savage winning liberty for his people. Toussaint adjusts with skill to his adopted role as ruler of the island, Continuing to profess allegiance to France, he nevertheless declares himself Governor-General of the island for life. As such, he signs trade agreements with powers such as the United States and Britain.
Toussaint Louverture and independent Haiti from 1791 to 1843. Toussaint is flexible enough to invite several former French colonists to return to their plantations, and yet strict enough to ensure that their ex-slaves get to work in a disciplined fashion as free laborers.
Simon Jose Antonio de la Santísima Trinidad Bolivar y Palacios, commonly known as Simon Bolivar, was a South American military and political leader. Together with Jose de San Martin, he played a key role in Hispanic America's successful struggle for independence from the Spanish Empire. Following the triumph over the Spanish monarchy, Bolivar anticipated in the foundation of the first union of the independent nations in Latin America, which was named Gran Colombia, and of which he was president from 1819 to 1830.
Simon Bolivar was a complex man. He was an idealist, an aristocrat secure in his heritage and status, a well-educated man and deep thinker who liked things done his way, a visionary and a revolutionary.
Jose de San Martin. Jose Francisco de San Martin Matorras, also known as Jose de San Martin, was an Argentine general and the prime leader of the southern part of the South America's successful struggle for independence from Spain. On July 12, 1821, after seizing partial control of Lima, San Martin was appointed protector of Peru, and Peruvian independence was officially declared on 28th day of July 1821. A year later, after a closed-door meeting with fellow libertador Simon Bolivar at Guayaquil, Ecuador on July 22, 1822, Bolivar took over the task of fully liberating Peru. San Martin unexpectedly left the country and resigned the command of his army, excluding himself from politics and the military, and moved to France in 1824. The details of the July 22 meeting would be a subject of debate by later historians.
Jose de San Martin. Together with Simon Bolivar, San Martin is regarded as one of the liberators of Spanish South America. He is the national hero of Argentina. The Order of the Liberator General San Martin, or Orden del Libertador San Martin, in his honor, is the highest decoration in Argentina.
Results of Latin American independence movement. Political and social. Continued battles between liberals, conservatives, and military over how to best rule. Tensions between articulate political forces and the separate masses. Economic. Unable to free itself from independence on Western-controlled economic patterns. Cultural and intelligent. Distinct cultural entity. Combination of Western styles and values but is racial discrimination.
Results of Latin American independence movements. Political and social. Continued battles between liberals, conservatives, and the military over how to best rule. Tensions between articulate political forces and the separate masses. Economic. Unable to free itself from dependence on Western controlled economic patterns. Cultural intelligence. There was a distinct cultural entity, combination of Western styles and values plus its racial discrimination.
Causes and effects of Latin American independence from 18th to 19th century.
The first cause. Spain sets up colonies in the Americas. Its effect. Many deaths occur. The second cause. Creoles and mestizos grew discontented with Spanish rule with independence. Its effect. Nations of Latin America. Enlightenment ideas spread to the Americas constitutions. Its effect. New nations write their own constitutions. Revolutions occur in North America and France. Civil wars break out. Spain's power weakens. Its effect, caudillos, a strongman leader, take power. Spain tries to restore authority in colonies economically independent. Its effect, new nations become economically dependent.